All right, we've got some breaking news. We want to take you to the White House, where just a few moments ago, the Taoiseach of Ireland, that's the Prime Minister, is sitting with President Trump on this St. Patrick's Day. Both are speaking with reporters. Let's listen in.
Assist the U.S. in escorting those oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz.
Well, we don't need too much help, and we don't need any help, actually. In fact, we just put out a notice. I was watching over the last couple of weeks, and all of our NATO allies were very much in favor of what we did. They thought it was very important. We were just discussing it, actually. Very important that we take out the nuclear threat from Iran, and we've done that very strongly, very powerfully. We've wiped out their Navy, wiped out their military in every aspect. Their Air Force is now decimated. They have no Air Force, no Navy. They have no radar. Their radar is entirely gone. Their anti-aircraft machinery is gone. Everything is gone. Their leaders are gone. I guess one of their top person was, they say, a lot of people say their actual top was killed yesterday, along with somebody else who was responsible for the killing. The man that was responsible for the killing of 32,000 people over the last 2 weeks, he was in charge of the killing of protesters. It's an evil group. I mean, they've killed much more than 32,000 people. And the man who was responsible for that was also killed yesterday. And all of the NATO allies agreed with us, but they don't want to, despite the fact that we help them so much. We have thousands of soldiers in different countries all over the world, and they don't want to help us, which is amazing. I mean, amazing. And I didn't do a full court press because I think if I did, they probably would be. But we don't need help. That war has been long prosecuted, as far as I'm concerned, almost from day one. We knocked out many of these things. We knocked out the Navy essentially in a couple of days. But I was surprised to see that NATO, while they agree that it was a very important thing to do, they agree fully. Nobody said, oh, you shouldn't do it. They would have had a nuclear weapon within 1 month of when we had the B-2 bombers bomb the nuclear potential. I call it the nuclear dust. So I think NATO's making a very foolish mistake. And I've long said that, I wonder whether or not NATO would ever be there for us. So this was a great test, because we don't need them, but they should have been there. The other thing is, and I think, very important, we didn't have to be there for Ukraine. Biden chose to spend hundreds of billions of dollars on Ukraine. And I guess the head of Germany just made a statement that, well, they weren't involved and they have nothing to do with the war. But at the same time, they think we did a great thing by knocking them out. Nobody wants to have Iran, or anybody, but nobody wants to have Iran with a nuclear, because these people are crazy. They're absolutely crazy, and they're vicious, violent. I mean, they kill. Think of it. They killed, now I hear it's about 41,000 people. They put out a notice 2 days ago. Anybody that protests will be immediately shot and killed. That's pretty tough stuff. So everyone agrees with us, but they don't want to help. And we as the United States have to remember that, because we think it's pretty shocking.
President Macron has just said in the last hour that he will never join a task force in the Strait of Hormuz until hostilities finish. Yesterday you said...
Who said that? Who said?
President Macron of France. What's your reaction to that, sir?
Well, he'll be out of office very soon, so we'll have to see. I don't know.
Mr. President, on Doonbeg, you're building an extension to it at the moment, but there's been an objection put in, and it's being held back at the moment due to small snails. What are you disappointed about that?
Planning Commission is
I have not heard that. No.
Mr. President.
I mean, the course was built and it's been operated very successfully. Somebody's objecting. Human and environmental group is objecting to.
Mr. President.
How close the EU is to announce a coalition of willing to secure the Strait of Hormuz? Which countries are joining and which countries have...
Well, we've had great support from the Middle East. Qatar has been great. UAE has been been great. Saudi Arabia has been terrific. Bahrain has been very good. The Middle Eastern countries have been very strong. in their support. And of course, Israel has been our partner. Israel's been very, very strong, along with our operation. Against Iran. If you look back ago, I talked about Iran was a big threat to this country, to this world. It turned out to be, I was right. In fact, I said you have to attack Karg Island. You have to attack them years ago when they were acting up. They've been acting up for 37, 47, I guess now 48 years. For 48 years, they've been bad players, vicious players, and you can't let them have a nuclear weapon. If they got a nuclear weapon, I would say they would have used it within 24 hours after having it. And they would have had it if we didn't bomb them out from that great raid with the B-2 bombers 8 months ago or so. You would have had a nuclear war in the Middle East and maybe beyond. I think it would have hit Europe. Maybe not Ireland, but it would have hit Europe. I think you would have been a nice piece of it. It all gets you. It's big enough that you would have been affected. They would have hit Europe eventually.
Mr. President,
Mr. President, your director of national counterterrorism, Joe Kent, he just resigned today. He said he can't support your conflict with Iran. What's your reaction to that? And did you?
Well, I read his statement. I always thought he was a nice guy, but I always thought he was weak on security, very weak on security. I didn't know him well, but I thought he seemed like a pretty nice guy. But when I read his statement, I realized that it's a good thing that he's out, because he said that Iran was not a threat. Iran was a threat. Every country realized what a threat Iran was. The question is whether or not they wanted to do something about it. And many people, many of the greatest military scholars are saying for years that president should have taken out Iran because they wanted a nuclear weapon. They were, if we didn't do the attack, or if, I'll go a step further, if I didn't terminate the Iran nuclear deal given to us, one of the worst deals ever made by Barack Hussein Obama. Remember when they sent Boeing 757s over there, loaded with cash, hundreds of millions of dollars? You would have been very happy. This was a wonderful, they said hundreds of millions. People forget that. Does anybody remember? Right? You remember. Hundreds of millions of dollars in a Boeing 757. I think they had two of them loaded. They took the seats out and they put cash. And it was so much that there wasn't a bank in Virginia, Maryland, or D.C. that had any money left. They stripped them of all their money, put it into place, sent it to Iran, almost as ransom. That's not going to happen with Trump. And nobody ever did anything about it. Nobody ever said anything about it. Can you imagine if I did that? So they've been a threat for a long time. But they've really been a threat. If I didn't terminate Obama's horrible deal that he made, the Iran nuclear deal, you would have had a nuclear war 4 years ago. You would have had nuclear holocaust. And you would have had it again if we didn't bomb the site. So when somebody is working with us that says they didn't think Iran was a threat, we don't want those people, because, and there are some people, I guess I would say that, but they're not smart people or they're not savvy people. Iran was a tremendous threat. And virtually every NATO nation, and this is the thing, if they told me it wasn't a threat, and therefore they don't want to help, but when they say it was a threat, and it was a major threat, every one of them, I think every one of them, I don't know of one that said they're not a threat, but when they say it was a threat, but we're not going to help, I think they're very foolish. You know, it's interesting. It's interesting because I could say this, that what's happening in Ukraine, we're probably in there for $400 billion. We don't spend any money anymore. They buy it from us and they pay full price. But Biden gave them between $350 and $400 billion of equipment and cash. Someday they'll have to find out about the cash. And you could say that wasn't a threat, you know, we're helping them. So we helped them, and they didn't help us. And I think that's a very bad thing for NATO.
Mr. President.
Are there any repercussions for NATO, and are you still going to China?
Well, yeah, on China, it's a little different story. We're resetting the meeting, and it looks like it'll take place in about 5 weeks. We're working with China. They were fine with it. We're going to say, I look forward to seeing President Xi. He looks forward to seeing me, I think. But I do look forward to seeing him. We have a good relationship with China. China actually has become economically for us very good, as you know. It's much different than it was in the past. And we have a very good working relationship with China. So we're making it in about 5 or 6 weeks.
Mr. President.
NATO for not supporting you on this. Any repercussions?
Well, no, I just think that it's not good for a partnership when they say what you're doing is a great thing, but we're not going to help. You know, they say what you did is a great thing, but we're not going to help.
Mr. President, in Iran, because the Iranian regime has told Sky News, if you put boots on the ground in Iran, it will be another Vietnam. Are you afraid of that?
No, I'm not afraid of. I'm really not afraid of anything.
Mr. President,
are you rethinking the United States' relationship with NATO possibly getting out?
Well, I'm disappointed in NATO that we spend trillions of dollars on NATO. Think of it, trillions over the years, many trillions of dollars. It's one of the reasons we have deficits and we help other countries. And when they don't help us, I mean, it's certainly something that we should think about. I don't need Congress for that decision. As you probably know, I can make that decision myself. I'd work with some very smart people. And I'd always deal with Congress anyway, but I don't need Congress for that decision. But, you know, when you say rethink, I have nothing currently in mind, but I will say that I'm not exactly thrilled when we help them with Ukraine. Look, Ukraine would have been over in 1 day if we didn't help. Frankly, Ukraine would have been over in the first day. They had the best equipment in the world. It was our equipment given by Sleepy Joe Biden. No charge, no charge. Hundreds of billions of dollars of the best equipment in the world, no charge. I will say that I'm not happy about it.
Mr. President,
Two questions, one on Iran and one on Cuba. Is Iran now a bigger foreign policy priority for you than China? And on Cuba, the Cuban government.
Iran is just a military operation to me. Iran is something that was essentially largely over in 2 or 3 days because the Navy was wiped out almost immediately. The Air Force came next. The anti-aircraft came next. I mean, we're flying over Iran. We could take out their electric capacity in 1 hour. We have all the. There's nothing they can do right now because everything is knocked out. They have no radar, no anti-aircraft. They have nothing, and we don't. And it was a decision I made. We discussed it. Pete, Marco, JD, all of us, Chris. We discussed it. We can knock out their electricity in a matter of minutes if we wanted to. There's nothing they can do about it. We can knock out their oil in Cargill, and the only thing we didn't take down was their oil, because if we knock out, I call them the pipes, very complex. But if you do that, it'll take them forever to rebuild, meaning whoever, and hopefully it's a sane group of people, but whoever it is that's going to be running that, and we're going to try to get people that are going to run it well, and it's going to be a prosperous, wonderful place. It used to be, if you go back, it used to be the people are great, the people are smart and energetic, and it used to be very successful. Now it's a country run by fear. It's a country where they tell protesters, don't go outside, because if you do, we're going to kill you.
Mr. President.
Well, Cuba right now is in very bad shape. They're talking to Marco, and we'll be doing something with Cuba very soon. We're really focused on this, but we're dealing with Cuba. Marco, do you want to say a couple of words about it?
Yeah, I mean, Cuba has an economy that doesn't work and a political and governmental system they can't fix. It's not dramatic enough. It's not going to fix it. So they've got some big decisions to make over there.
But Secretary Rubio, do you support, and I know this is up to Congress, but do you support easing the trade embargo if you get more cooperation from them?
Well, I'm not going to discuss what we would talk about or not. Suffice it to say that the embargo is tied to political change on the island. The embargo is codified. But the bottom line is their economy doesn't work. It's a non-functional economy. It's an economy that has survived. That revolution, it's not even a revolution, that thing they have, has survived on subsidies from the Soviet Union and now from Venezuela. They don't get subsidies anymore, so they're in a lot of trouble. And the people in charge, they don't know how to fix it. So they have to get new people in charge. That's what has to happen.
And the relationship we have with Venezuela has been, I think you could almost say, incredible. It's been really good. It's been good for Venezuela, and it's been good for us. And I congratulate the Venezuelan baseball team because that was a big win. And I guess they play another game tonight in the finals. This is the first time they've ever been in the finals, and it was pretty exciting. Yeah.
Iran is just a military operation to you, but do you not have a day after plan? And if so, what is your day after plan for Iran?
Well, we have a lot. Look, if we left right now, it would take 10 years for them to rebuild. But we're not ready to leave yet. But we'll be leaving in the near future. We'll be leaving in pretty much the very near future. But right now, they've been decimated from every standpoint. And again, we've had great support from countries in the Middle East, great support, but we've had no support from, essentially, no support from NATO.
Mr. President, what about your relationship with London? Has it been damaged by the fact that Keir Starmer isn't supporting you in this war? And has your opinion of Keir Starmer changed because of this?
Well, he hasn't been supporting the United States. I went out of my way. As you know, they couldn't make a deal with Biden because they had no real administration to make a deal, Biden. But we made a deal. We made a good deal for them, and frankly, probably wasn't appreciated. I do look forward to seeing. But no, I was disappointed because Keir was willing to send 2 aircraft carriers after we won, because essentially there's no threat for the aircraft carriers right now. And they said, no, we want things sent before the war, not after the war is won. So, yeah, I'm disappointed with Keir. I like him. I think he's a nice man, but I'm disappointed.
Mr. President.
You see that man right there? You know who that is?
Churchill. Winston Churchill.
The late, great Winston Churchill. And Barack Hussein Obama did not want his bust in this office. Did you know that? And Barack Hussein Obama sent that bust back to England. They didn't want it. And when I came in, I was asked if I wanted it. I said, absolutely, I want it. And I put it right there, Winston Churchill. And, you know, unfortunately, Keir is not Winston Churchill.
Do you have
Hold it.
Right. Just could I
hold it? Hold it.
Just make a number of points. First of all, I think, notwithstanding what has happened, the transatlantic relationship between Europe and the US is very, very important on a number of fronts. And I think we've had issues over the last year or two, but we settled them. And I think many of these leaders engage with you, particularly on trade initially. Remember all the fuss last year, but we got a landing zone between Europe and the US, and I think we can get a landing zone again. And I think I just met with Keir Starmer last week. The British-Irish relationship is a very important one. Churchill was a great wartime leader, although in Ireland there was kind of a different perspective in terms of during our War of Independence and so on. He created his own bit of difficulties for us, but that said, he was a great wartime hero. Keir Starmer has done a lot to reset the Irish-British relationship. I just want to put that on the record. But I do believe that he's a very earnest, sound person who I think you have a capacity to get on with, and you've got on with him before, and you've got on with other European leaders as well. Sure. And I think you have that capacity again, and I think everyone exists. I mean, you cannot have a rogue state with a nuclear weapon or the capacity for a nuclear weapon. Iran was a sponsor of terrorism. We sanctioned Iran, all European countries did, as a and the IRGC in particular as a terrorist organisation. They sponsored Hamas, they sponsored Hezbollah, the Houthis. They created mayhem, a most maligned force in the Middle East. The Irish position has always been, ultimately, can we resolve this can we get peace? And obviously there's preconditions before you get to that situation. We had our own conflict, which went on for 30 years, and we learned a lot from that in terms of how to try and bring about peace. And I think I've listened to you in terms of, you're correct. I mean, our hearts go to the Iranian people who have been repressed and suppressed for so many years, culminating in that savage murder of thousands and thousands of Iranians some months ago. No one was in a position to do anything about that. I think, and likewise with Ukraine, I mean, the Russians did invade Ukraine, have taxed civilian infrastructure and so on like that. And for the people of Ukraine who just want peace and an opportunity to live, I think we have to continue to work to see, can we bring peace, different regime to Iran, where Iranians can live in peace again, and the people in the Middle East can live in peace. And you're doing your bit there in terms of the work in Gaza and so on like that. And I think that's what we want, is a peaceful resolution of conflict. That's where we come from as a small nation. Right. We've been peacekeepers all our lives. And we're the longest serving nation in terms of provision of peacekeeping forces in the world, as it turns out. But we think ultimately all conflicts come to an end, and I think we have to try and work towards that end. And I'm sure European leaders and the US administration will engage, and hopefully we can get a landing zone.
I mean, the only thing, and I agree with everything you said, but we helped with Ukraine.
Yes.
And they don't help with Iran. And they all acknowledge that Iran can't have a nuclear weapon. You yourself say, these are horrendous people. These are the worst people, and going back to Hitler, right? Going back to Hitler, these are the worst people. That's a long time ago. And there's been nothing close. Every problem, so many deaths, 90% of the people that got blown up by landmines, they loved them. Soleimani, we killed him. If we didn't, it might be a different story, because he was a horrible person, but he was a very powerful person and leader, smart. But we killed him. If we didn't, I think you'd have it. I did. But I think it would have maybe a different situation. It wouldn't have been so easy as it has been, because it has been very easy. It's all of their military is there, but you can always have somebody drop a mine in the water. It's like terrorism. Yep. And then you have the people that own the billion-dollar ship saying, well, let's not move that ship yet because we want. So we thought that Europe would help that, because they do have some minesweepers. But it's amazing that, they all said, what a great job. They would call me congratulating us on the great job we did with respect to Iran, and we knocked the hell out of them. They're no longer the bully of the Middle East. They were known as the bully of the Middle East, and they're not the bully anymore. But you would have thought they would have said, we'd love to send a couple of minesweepers. It's not a big deal. It doesn't cost very much money. But they didn't do that. So, I think it's very unfair to the United States. Not to me, but to the United States. Go ahead, please.
Keir Starmer isn't making...
She's a fantastic reporter, by the way. Go ahead.
The Prime Minister isn't making the case to the British public as to why he should be supporting you. Could you do that now and talk to the UK and to GB News viewers about why it's in their interest that we help you?
Well, because we have a tremendous long-term relationship with the UK. I mean, people would say it's the best. I don't want to get into that, but we've had, it was the longest, the oldest, should be the best. Always was the best until Keir came along, and I like him. He's a nice man. He says everything beautiful. He's a very nice man with a beautiful family. Everything's perfect, but he doesn't produce. And I think it's very inexpensive. I just said, you don't have to send me aircraft carriers. Send me a couple of minesweepers. We don't need your aircraft carriers. But even the aircraft carriers, he would only send them after we essentially won. I mean, he's sending them when there are no planes left, when the missiles are down to 8%. They have like 8% of the missiles. The rest, we demolish the missiles, and the factories, largely the factories are going even as we speak. They just hit another factory. They have a lot of missile factories. They have a lot of drone factories. And so he's, wants to send them when we don't need them. But we'd like to have minesweepers, because just in case. We don't know that there are any mines down, because we wiped out, I think, 24. They actually have, think of this for a country. They have 24 boats that do nothing but put mines in the water. This doesn't sound like a great country. This doesn't sound like a friendly country. But we killed all of those boats. They're at the bottom of the sea. so we don't even know if there are any mines there. But if there are, we'd like to have a little help in finding them. Probably most importantly.
Would you like to change your Prime Minister? Do you have confidence in Keir Starmer? Would you prefer to deal?
Well, it's not for me. It's really for the people of the UK to have confidence.
Of course, but is he?
I've been very critical of Keir, and I did it in a friendly way. I said, if you don't change your energy thing and get away from windmills and go back to oil and gas, and you have something that's no other country has. Very few countries have anything like it, the North Sea. You have some of the greatest oil and oil deposits in the entire world, the North Sea. They don't use it. You buy a lot of your oil from Norway. You know where they get their oil? From the North Sea. And you pay and I tell them, you have the better part of the North Sea. So why aren't they taking the oil from the North Sea? Why are they buying oil from Norway? But they have windmills all over the country, destroying those gorgeous Scottish fields and those beautiful fields all over the windmills, which don't work. They're tremendously expensive. And the best testament to that is the windmills are made in China, but China doesn't use them. You know what China uses? Coal. They're building 58 coal-fired plants right now, and that's up to them. But these foolish countries that are buying windmills, putting them out of business, I'm proudly telling you that we're going to try and have no windmills built in the United States during my... They're very bad. They're very bad environmentally. They kill the birds. They're unsightly. They make a lot of noise. And for some reason, the environmentalists love windmills, okay?
You say he's a very nice man.
I think he's a nice man. I think he's a nice man, but I disagree with him on two things primarily. His immigration policy is a disaster, and his energy policy is a disaster. And they're about the biggest policies you can have.
We've been listening to President Trump speak to reporters there. He is, of course, hosting the Taoiseach of Ireland today, with it being St. Patrick's Day. That's essentially the prime minister. Took a lot of questions from reporters about Iran, as well as a number of other things. So I want to turn now to Olivia Rinaldi at the White House. Of course, Olivia, we've been listening to the president who started speaking just before noon. I want to start with some of the comments that he made about Iran and NATO. He was asked about needing NATO to help when it comes to Iran to secure the Strait of Hormuz. I found this very interesting. He said that, quote, he did not need much help, and then he rephrased and said he did not need any help. This is a little bit counter to what we have heard him talk about wanting NATO to get involved when it comes to securing the Strait of Hormuz. What was your reaction to those comments?
Well, the president is quite angry with NATO allies, sitting with one there today in the Oval Office, the Taoiseach of Ireland. And the president was saying essentially that NATO is making what he called a foolish mistake by not agreeing to help the U.S. in securing the Strait of Hormuz or helping with some of the offensive action that the U.S. and Israel forces have been taking inside of Iran. He was quite upset. He also lashed out at British Prime Minister Keir Starmer, saying he's nothing like Winston Churchill, of who the president has a bust behind him in the Oval Office today, which you could see right there on the screen as well. And the president is quite upset. He also said, as far as French President Macron, that he'll be out of office soon. He said that the U.S. is getting better support from the Middle East and Middle Eastern countries than they are from NATO allies. The president also explained it in the sense in talking about Ukraine, which I thought was interesting because you can kind of see how the president approaches foreign policy, which is, tit for tat action a little bit, where he says the U.S. helped with Ukraine, but he says that NATO is not helping with Iran. He says that the U.S. didn't have to help with Ukraine, given the fact that it was happening on the European continent and was something that he felt European allies should have been stepping up and addressing. But when it comes to Iran, which he is framing as an issue of security for the entire world, given Iran's proxies and their ability to strike across the world with terror cells that are in countries, Western countries across the world. The president says that that is a major security threat. And because of that, NATO allies should be willing to join in and help out. So very notable interactions there happening with a European leader who is sitting next to him, a European leader, I should note, who said that Ireland doesn't have anything to give because they are a part of NATO, which has been noted to be a defensive ally, not an offensive ally. The reason why they have responded in giving weapons, money, humanitarian aid to Ukraine is because they were offensively attacked, but noting that Iran has been offensively attacked by Israeli and U.S. forces. So interesting framing having there, especially from a very long-time U.S. ally of Ireland who's visiting the White House on St. Patrick's Day.
Yeah, I like that you brought up the framing with Ukraine. I thought that was an interesting comparison as well. I also took note here that he said, the NATO hasn't been there for the U.S., and he framed it saying this is a test. That felt very much like a warning to me, though he did stop short of saying that there would be consequences for NATO when he was directly asked about that. I also want to get your take on Israel, because this came up during questions. I mean, the president has faced criticism about aligning with Israel from some of the major voices in the MAGA movement. What did you take away from his comments about Israel in that meeting?
Yeah, very notable. He said that the U.S.-Israeli relationship is as strong as it's ever been, and I find that very notable today for two reasons. One, because we have seen reporting that Israeli forces, which have been carrying out strikes across Iran in conjunction with the U.S., but they announced today that they actually killed the second-in-command in Iran, Ali Larijani, who was seen by the U.S. as someone who was a negotiator. He negotiated the Iran nuclear deal. He's also someone who was willing to perhaps pull back from some of the aggressive reactions from Iran on the ground, seen as someone who could be temperamental, someone who could work with the U.S. But he was killed as a result of some of these Israeli forces' actions. Again, that's reported. I don't believe CBS has confirmed that as of yet. We are going off of what we've heard from Israeli sources, but that is quite notable that they're willing to take that sort of action, and still the president is willing to say, we stand behind Israel. Also of note, because of what we saw today from Joe Kent, who was the director of the National Counterterrorism Center here in Washington, the top counterterrorism official in the United States, who resigned and said specifically he was resigning because he believes that Israel had pushed the U.S. into war by creating this framework idea that now was the time to strike. So alleging that the president was pulled into war with Iran because of the actions of Israel and the threat assessment that they were presenting to the president. And still the president in the Oval Office today dismissing Joe Kent, saying he thought he was a nice guy, but weak on security. And glad he's out because Iran was a significant security threat for the world and for the U.S., but willing to continue to stand behind Israel and saying that they are a strong U.S. ally, particularly as it relates to the Strait of Hormuz and the actions inside of Iran currently. So all very notable there.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought up the Joe Kent thing, because, of course, that's something that we've been talking about earlier. And I did think that was a little bit of an interesting moment. He's like, I thought he was a nice guy, but weak on security. Olivia, thank you for joining us, for breaking it down. Really appreciate your insight here.